Okay, now we'll check the motor real quick. First I just spin it by hand just to get an idea of what the bearings feel like. They feel a little stiff, but again, this is a motor from the 50s. It most likely needs new bearings. So carefully I'm going to plug it in first with the switch off, that way I can make sure the switch is working good. Then I'll unplug it, flip the switch on, and then plug it back in. That way I'm not likely to hurt myself on these electrical things. And there'll probably be a nice puff of dust go up once I do it. Okay, switch is off, unplugged, flip the switch on. Okay, so that sounded a little noisy to me, and again the motor is 50 years old, so I think it'd be a real good idea while I have it to go ahead and change the bearings on the motor. With the motor open I can clean it out real good too, so we'll do that. To have me do the bearing work for you if you'd like. So I'm pressing off the quill bearing. If at any time all of this seems overwhelming to you, remember it's perfectly okay to send me your headstock as is, even if it's in pieces, to have me complete it for you. Or it's certainly okay to just send me components, either for checking, inspection, or to press bearings on for you. I'll work with you any way I can. So feel free to contact me if you feel it's too much for you. Bearing gone. Now we'll work on the drive sleeve. The one came off as we took it apart. Now we have to take this one off. Okay, there's the other drive sleeve bearing gone. Okay, I'm going to change this quadrant now. Use a drift pin punch. Push the pin out. There's the old one. We'll toss. Now clean up the inside and put the new piece in. Okay. I always figure might as well clean everything up before you reassemble, so it starts off fresh. It's going to have enough sawdust back in it soon enough. Okay, so now the new quadrant is ready to go back in. Just have to align the holes up. Get the pin back in. Okay, now we're ready to start reassembling the casting and all the components. So I'm going to spend a few minutes cleaning the inside up real good and all the components too. Cleaning you see on this tape is greatly edited time-wise. I spend quite a bit of time cleaning every crevice that I can possibly to restore the equipment. I feel like if you don't get all the dust the very first time you turn it on, it's going to get sucked right back into the motor. So you might as well start off with it being as clean as possible. And you'll notice already how clean the inside of the headstock is. That every single component I clean as good as I can. Before I put things back together, I'm going to put some powdered graphite here and then just outside so that the threads for the headstock lock operate smoothly. Put things on. In this area you need to look for burrs, which can make your quill run roughly going in and out, and you can file any burrs down you might find. Okay, I'm going to show you how to change out this idler shaft in the case that this bearing was bad. The headstock we worked on didn't need it, but you replace the bearing attached to the shaft, so you recycle the sheave and you recycle two clips. One clip is at the base way down in here. It's really impossible to show you because it's always covered with dust, but basically you can use a hooked pick like this to get it free from the shaft. Okay, go ahead. Stop. Okay, so there's the little copper colored clip that was over the shaft. Now we can use a mallet and just hammer the shaft out. Okay, so we're going to be keeping that part. And then after the old shaft we need to keep the key. And there's another little C-clip down here at the base that we need to keep. So we pry that loose. And we'll transfer that to the new shaft. So that there is what keeps this from rubbing right on the bearing. So you'll have to clean these pieces up, put this one on the shaft, the new shaft first. The key is bent at the end, and that goes into this little hole, and that's just to keep the key from sliding in and out. Then you would put the sheave on the new shaft, bring it down home, and then put the retaining clip inside of that. It goes onto this middle detent right here, just like that. So that keeps the sheave from moving in or out. And that's all there is to that. vacuum, I use the brush head on the vacuum to help reach into crevices in the shiv. There's a lot of crevices and you're not going to get them perfectly clean even with a toothbrush. I make good use of toothbrushes to get into small areas, as well as using wire brushes. Brass brushes are very good for cleaning components without scratching them. Steel brushes clean a little deeper, and as I mentioned, you can use liquid parts washers or vibrating parts cleaners, steam cleaners. There's many ways to clean up your components to get them looking real good. When I work on a headstock, I'm not working to restore it. I work on it to make it good mechanically. That is to say, I stress the mechanical work over the cosmetic work. Sometimes customers do ask me to work on them deeper cosmetically, but that is certainly something the end user can spend more time doing themselves economically. So everything gets scrubbed as well, and mineral spirits to get more off as appropriate. And if you want, you can use a parts cleaner, steam cleaner, parts washers, all sorts of things to really make them shine if you're restoring a machine. Okay, now I'm going to put the quill back together. I just finished scrubbing the spline shaft. Everything's been cleaned. Pretty simple to go back together. Hardest part is just making sure the bearing doesn't slip up on you as you put it back in. And just the exact reverse order of how it came apart. Easier to go back together, typically. Snap things in there good. And we just have to put the collar on. And the collar locks onto the flat area. Just like that. I don't bother putting putty back into the set screws. It's easier to get things apart again for re-inspection next time. There's the quill all cleaned up, ready to go back together. At this point we could either use Johnson's paste wax on it, or we could use top coat spray. I use either one to help it glide in and out easier. Okay. You can also use the wax inside your way tube holes in the headstock casting and inside this quill housing hole. A couple other good places for it. So we'll let that dry and then we'll buff it off. Okay. So be sure all of these are clean. I've just waxed them to clean them, scrub them out, use mineral spirits. Okay, now we're going to start reassembly with the Quill advanced mechanism. So we'll slide it in just part way, and we have to make sure it goes through that domed washer correctly. So if you can see in there, the domed washer is on the outside of the bracket facing the outside of the machine. And we have this tubular thing going through. We just have to bring it home and it'll stop. You want the index mark lined up with your set screw, and that gives you the stop, the precision stop for your drill depth. So lock that in with the set screw. I've already cleaned all of the threads and everything, so first goes the flat washer if you have one, serrated washer with the rough side out, facing the outside of the machine. And then our depth stop so that 0 hits like that. The other serrated washer, this time rough side facing inside the machine. And then the feed stop handle. So that's it for that side. The other side, we have this lock washer and then the Quill lock handle. And that's going back together quickly. Okay, what I like to do next is put the Quill in. On this machine I'll have to take it back out to get the switch in later. So we need our handle, get our Quill feed handle. We have to set the spring, so here's the 0 point. So I have to turn it 3 times clockwise. 1, 2, 3. Now I just bring the Quill in, engage it in the teeth, ease it back. So that's working well. I'm going to open it up a little bit so I can get the Gilmer belt in. I've cleaned that as well. Now I'm ready to put the drive sleeve back in with the new bearings. I'll put the grease guard back on it. If you don't have that, if it gets lost, nothing really to worry about. But on the Poly V, you definitely need the drive ring. It looks a lot like that. So I have to engage it to where it fits, slides over the Quill. I tilt it up. Now let it down in until it seats. And now I'm ready to put this retaining clip back in. Just get it started in the groove inside there. Spiral it down in. And it'll click into place. It just disappears. You might have to use a screwdriver to help it out, but if you cleaned out the areas and your bearings don't move as you push it back in, it'll set perfect. And everything turns together here. Okay, now we're ready to put together to work with the eccentric and the idler shaft and sheave. So it's the opposite of how we did it. This mark is out. Just going to get that started a little bit. Actually, for reassembly, I like putting a little bit of oil inside and out. just to help it go in easier, and put a little here. Just helps things slide together easier. That distributes it. And I'll get it started in here too. Okay, so now we have to loop this around the inside the Gilmer belt or the polyglue belt and swing it up in place like this. You have to be careful doing that so you don't damage this casting here. And now we have to tighten this set screw again to hold the idler shaft inside the eccentric. Okay, so now I'm ready to put in these little brackets again. So I have to put them in and then slide the bolt through them. On the newer machines it's easier, you don't have this bracket to worry about. And I'm just going to put the nut and lock washer on loosely to start. Everything's been cleaned before reassembly, all the little parts. Okay, that's going to keep it from coming back too far. Right there. Okay, now I'm going to flop this and put the speed control mechanism back together. First I have to put on the new control sheave. So I'm going to put a little oil in that. And work it a little bit on the idler shaft. Get some of the oil distributed. So that's the other oiling point. One point is the sheave on the motor. This is the other one. And I'm going to put the new drive belt in here as well. Open the sheave a little bit. Get the belt kind of between them, just so it's in the ballpark. Okay, so now we're going to start on putting the speed control system together. So the dial goes down first. If it's a newer machine, there's a little spring has to be in place there. On the greenies, we want this spring clip. Have it pointed up towards V. Okay, so here's the new speed control mechanism with the new quadrant on it. And what I do is I turn it up to just about where it hits the high speed stop. I adjust it so that the flat points up, and then another quarter turn or so is where it hits the high speed stop. That lines it pretty good for the high speed setting and sets you up for V when you have the flat straight up and down for your handle. And then I like to put a little bit of grease on the worm gear, and just a touch here, just to help things start sliding. Let me get it back together. This is lithium grease. And I'll work it back and forth a little bit just to help distribute it. But leave it with the flat up very near the high speed setting. Now I drop it into place. And we're going to tighten those 3 screws down. if you ever have the casing stripped behind these screws, it's okay to replace the bolts and have a nut behind, a nut and a lock washer, not too long a bolt so you don't hit other things inside, but hopefully you won't have any stripped out screw holes. But this is soft aluminum, and so if you over tighten it, or somebody before you over tightened it, they can be stripped quite easily. And you want this spring in this position here so your handle doesn't rattle. Okay, so everything's good and snug. Now inside we're going to put the clip from the control sheave over the quadrant so it looks like that. And now I'm going to put on the speed handle. I like to put my Allen wrench on it first. Easier to see it there. Get it over the shaft. Give it a little twist, make sure it's connected. And tighten it up. And you can see when I turn the handle, the dial turns, so everything's lined up right. So with this being a greenie and the switch being so large, I have to take the Quill back out before I can put the motor back on. So I'm doing just what I did a little while ago. Just turning it, pulling it forward, easing this back, spring tension. On the newer models, you don't have to worry about that. I didn't put the set screw in before, so I was able to take it out without that. So now I'm going to set the machine in preparation for the motor. So I'm just wrapping the tape together to keep it a little neater, or wrapping the wires together to keep it a little neater. Or you can use cable ties. I'm going to do it two places, one down here closer to the motor, one here closer to the switch. I usually use cable ties, but this machine had a black tape in it. Be sure and be real safe with the electrical things. If you're not sure what you're doing, just ask somebody qualified. Okay, so now I'm going to snake this in up underneath the headstock lock area. I'm going to reach through, feed that, put the nut on the other side. Again, it's much easier if you have the inspection port. You can wait till this is all reconnected before you have to reach through and do the switch. And also you don't have to take the Quill out like I did for the screening. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the motor case to the headstock casting. I'll just pull the belt over and attach these 4 screws. On the newer machines they use little speed clips and screws. On this old machine they didn't, and often these little screw holes are stripped. Okay, and I'll put the drive belt under the shiv now. I lift the shiv apart, get it started, turn it. Okay, so now I have the drive belt connected to both shivs. So it's time to put the quill back in on the greenie here. Same as before, tighten the spring up 3 turns. Now it's a little bit trickier with the drive sleeve in place. You have to feel for where it engages in the drive sleeve. There we go. And now I need to put the set screw in. Put it partway in to start, make sure we're tracking right. And then we'll tighten it till it locks the quill, and then back it off till it releases it. So that way it stays in the track, won't come out too far, doesn't bind it going in and out. And all of our shafts are connected together with their belts now. Okay, now it's time. What I do is I manually turn the speed down. We're still up at the V setting. I'm going to just hand turn the quill, turn the speed back down to a reasonable speed before I plug it in. You could put a lathe faceplate on, or your disc sander disc. I just grab it like this. Okay, so I brought it down to drum sand, disc sand. That's low enough. Now I'm going to plug it in for the first run. Okay, and a lot of the rattles will disappear once we get all the case screws back in. But I'm going to unplug it now. And we're going to adjust the tension on the upper belt. Right now I still have this eccentric set at 6 o'clock, so I'll bring it up towards 8 or 9 o'clock. It's pretty, that upper belt's pretty loose. So we have to use a screwdriver in that slot, get it twisted, and you have to use a mallet as well. A little harder with these 2 little brackets in the way. The newer machines are a lot easier to adjust. Go. Usually somewhere around 8 or 9 o'clock. Works pretty good. Okay, it feels pretty good. So that right there would also take care of some of the noise. And now we have to tighten up the bolt so that the eccentric doesn't turn. I just bring it snug enough to take the slack out of the split washer, so that will keep it from rotating. On this one I can feel on this side the tension of the belt. There's no opening on this side, otherwise I like to feel through both sides. Good. Now when you've reassembled your headstock and you're at the very slow setting speed, you can look inside your headstock and the drive belt should be at the outside of this sheave or within 1/8 of an inch of the outside of this sheave. And if you need to make an adjustment, I'll show you how to do that. So here's how you would adjust this if you want to get the belt farther out. Turn the machine on, turn it until you can access the set screw at the very top. Now you can easily take the speed handle off, and by hand you can adjust the dial one way or the other. I'll just adjust it up to C. That doesn't affect the shaft at all, just the dial. Put the handle back on, tighten it. Now we can dial back down and see where the slow speed setting in relation to the belt is. So that one letter adjustment brought this belt just about to the very outside of the pulley. So you can just do that according to what your particular machine would need. So I like the way this looks right here. Okay, now I can put on the back cover, and that's already been vacuumed out and wiped out. Okay, now we'll put a couple of screws in this. I'm not going to put them all back in. It's just too hard to get back in there for lubing purposes. So I'm just going to put standard 2 on each side. And these are frequently stripped out on greenies also because they were tapped right into the casting rather than using speed clips. So now we'll turn it back up and give it another run now that we tensioned it. We got the case on. I don't really recommend that customers use their headstocks above saw setting. It doesn't really make a very good router at 5200 RPM. You're much better off to use a modern router for routing purposes. Okay, sounds pretty good. These machines tend to be noisy anyway. There's so many parts that can rattle. The back covers can rattle. These parts up here can rattle. Your handle. Shopsmiths tend to be kind of noisy machines anyway. When they get on the bench, they'll be a little quieter because you don't have these handles rattling as well. But I like to test it with a decibel meter too, so let me turn it on again. And this one tests right about where every other one does. It's like 80, 82 dB. So that's a real good way to gauge how well it went. But you saw how smoothly the dial moved. There's no skips or gaps in the turning of this. So it changed speeds smoothly, didn't labor. Everything sounds good and quiet. Everything turns together. So now you just have to clean up the case a little bit with mineral spirits or other compounds if you want. And this is ready to put back on the machine. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this process and that you learned a thing or two.